Therefore, let's see in full details how to glorify in the praises of our Lord, the Lord of the heavens and the earth, the Lord of the throne, using purely the Quran alone. So here in page 1 is where everything concerning the worship practice, nusuk, of the tasbih is going to be seen, as this page will interconnect with all the other 8 pages, 2 to 9. So here you are looking at all 92 times the root word to glorify is mentioned, and its 7 derived forms in the whole Quran. Here at the top right, twice as the form 2, verbal noun tasbih, is where the word tasbih is mentioned in the Quran. And they are said here in Surah 17 verse 44 and Surah 24 verse 41. Let's first see Surah 17 verse 44, as this verse will also mention the form 2 verb tusabbihu and yusabbihu here on the left. The 7 heavens and the earth and whatever is in them glorify him, and there is not a thing that but glorifies with his praises, but you do not understand their glorification. Tasbihahum. Indeed, he is forbearing, forgiving. Thus, everything glorifies Allah, and they all have their own glorifications. And in Surah 24 verse 41 it says, do you not see that Allah, to him glorifies whatsoever is in the heavens and the earth, and the birds with wings outspread, or spreading. Safat. Each one definitely knows its salat and its glorification. وَتَصْبِحَهُ. And Allah is all-knower of what they do. Here again, this verse is telling us that everything glorifies Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but with the addition of the birds with their wings outspread, or V-shaped, lined up. And this is a very important knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us, as we will see very soon. We also saw this verse in the salat video, in all the time frames part of the video, which clearly distinguishes the salat and the tasbih. You will notice that I've color-coded every verse here, and all the verses highlighted in green on the right here, the 41 times as the noun sabahan, glory be. These are all the verses that you can say during the glorification. I will be briefly going through them soon as well, after we see how to glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the Quran, inshallah. And here highlighted in green on the left are the to-dos verses, as well as the other glorification verses to say, and everything that glorifies Him verses as well. All that is highlighted in blue with a yellow font are all referring directly to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or one of His attributes. This and the green color are the only common colors in this tasbih document. What is highlighted in red are any negative aspects. Finally, highlighted here in yellow are the time frames for the tasbih, glorification. And it is in this that we will be delving into first in full details before we see the physical motions and utterances of the tasbih, glorification through the Quran alone, inshallah. As you can see on the left, there are 15 yellow highlighted verses that involve the time frames among the 42 times as the form 2 verb, sabbaha, to glorify, and an additional time frame here on the right, which is also highlighted in yellow among the 41 times as the noun sabahan, glory be. Thus you have a total of 16 verses that mention the time frames of the tasbih, glorification. If we remove all the other verses here and leave only the time frame verses which are highlighted in yellow, this will result to what is on page 2. So here in page 2, on the top, you have all the time frame verses for the tasbih, glorification, which was on page 1. As you can see, there are a total of 16 occurrences, 15 times as the form 2 verb sabbaha, plus once as the noun sabahan below them here. Now within these 16 occurrences, there are a few verses that repeat the same time frames. So below them, where it says no repeats, you have them without repetitions. The repeated verses of the time frames are written here on the left. You can compare this with the above. And just below, it's even more precise because you have them written individually. Thus, you have a total of 12 different times to glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, if we look at all the time frames in the Quran, this was clearly explained in the Salat video, or all the time frames video. So I will not be re-explaining it here. Click here if you have not seen it, because you might be lost. However, just to briefly refresh your memory, here in the middle, in purple, is the horizon, and the sun rises from the east here. When crossing this blue line means the sun is visible, and the sun sets in the west here, and crossing this red line means the sun is no longer visible. Since there are only 3 salat time frames or instances compared to the tasbih, those 3 salat time frames will actually facilitate to easily identify all the tasbih instances. Hence, the distinguishment of the salat and the tasbih instances facilitates the remembrance of Allah, dhikrillah. Let's see how by first identifying the 3 salat instances. You first have Salatul Fajr, the dawn contact prayer, here on the right. Then Salatul Wusta, the middle contact prayer, here in the middle as the sun is declining towards the night. And finally, you have Salatul Isha, the late evening contact prayer. Now that these three time frames are clearly identified, and that I had explained them thoroughly in the Salat video time frames, that they are separate entities from the Tasbih time frames as said in Surah 24 verse 41. Therefore, we will now see and apply the time frames for the Tasbih by starting from Salatul Fajr, the dawn contact prayer, as a starting point here on the right. In case you do not know, dawn, Fajr, is part of the dawn twilight as the sun starts to rise from the east, as you can see in this image. There are three types of twilight from the period of time just before sunrise and or just after sunset. Those three types of twilight are very well known as the civil twilight, the nautical twilight, and the astronomical twilight. The main difference between these three twilights is the time at which the sun is at a specific degree below the horizon. As you can see in the following image, the civil twilight is 6 degrees below the horizon, the nautical twilight is 12 degrees below the horizon, and the astronomical twilight is 18 degrees below the horizon. If you go to www.timeanddate.com and then you click on sun and moon near the middle, and then near the left, you input your city or country. So for me it would be Montreal, and it will automatically come up, then hit search. Then scroll down and bring it to today's sun position. Now below that you have night, twilight, and daylight times. You can now easily identify your astro, nautical, and civil twilight in this website as it corresponds to the graph above. The rise of the sun, the meridian, and the set here are the same as those we can see here in all the time frames in the Quran, but inverted, east to west, west to east. Salatul Fajr, the dawn contact prayer, starts between the astronomical twilight and the nautical twilight, which is also the astronomical and nautical dawn, which the sun starts to lighten up the sky. Prior to the astronomical twilight, the sky is completely dark, the night. This is also what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran in Surah Baqarah 2, verse 187, as to how one should fast like in the month of Ramadan from the 31st Arabic word as follows. And eat and drink until the white thread becomes distinct, clear, yatabayyana, to you from the black thread from dawn, Fajr. Then complete the fast till the night, al-layl. During the late evening, this is the point where the sky turns completely dark, which is the astronomical dusk, and we will be seeing that soon. Since Salatul Fajr is the best starting point, and where one should have woken up from his or her sleep, then the first thing to do is to glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as it says in Surah 52, verse 48, as follows. And be patient for the wise judgment of your Lord, for indeed you are in our eyes. And glorify with the praise of your Lord once you arise. Hence, once you arise from sleep, you glorify in the praise of your Lord. And then, the next verse in this surah, which is also the last verse in Surah 52 verse 49, says, And from the night, then glorify Him, and at the retreat of the stars. Here you have the two additional time frames to glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The night, which we will see as we get to the night time frame, and at the retreat of the stars, or the setting of the stars. Now personally, when I wake up for Salatul Fajr, the dawn contact prayer, from my sleep, and then glorify Allah as I have arised from sleep, then I do my wudu, ablution, and it is obligatory to do before establishing the salat, as said in Surah 5, Ma'idah, verse 6. However, there is no wudu required for the tasbih. And since the retreat of the stars or the setting of the stars is during the Fajr time frame, the twilight of the dawn time frame, I will then do another glorification because that is also the retreat of the stars or the setting of the stars time frame, which is during the astronomical twilight, and then perform Salatul Fajr, the dawn contact prayer. Then, right after Salatul Fajr is completed, there is another glorification which is before the rising of the sun, as mentioned in Surah 20 verse 130 from the 5th Arabic word to the 10th Arabic word, and in Surah 50 verse 39 as follows. And glorify with the praise of your Lord before the rising of the sun, قَبَلَ طُلُوعِ الشَّمْسِ. Thus the third tasbih time frame, before the rising of the sun glorification, and Salatul Fajr can easily and beautifully be accomplished between the nautical twilight and the civil twilight, inshallah. Then, at the sunrise, or a few minutes after the sunrise, depending on where you live, which is about an hour after dawn, this is where the next glorification is, the fourth tasbih, the sunrise glorification, as said in Surah 38, verse 18, as follows. Indeed, we subjected the mountains with him, Prophet Dawood, glorifying us in the late evening and the sunrise. وَالْإِشْرَاقَ. This makes 4 glorifications. Now the sun should be breaking through the horizon as it is reaching higher degrees in altitude. As that happens, the 5th tasbih time frame is noticed, the daybreak glorification, subh, as said in Surah 30 verse 17. So glory be to Allah at the time you reach evening and at the time you reach daybreak, tusbihun. Now the sun is still continuing to go higher in altitude. This is where the 6th tasbih time frame is, the early morning glorification time frame, which starts as the sun continues to go higher in altitude. The 6th glorification is mentioned in Surah Light, Surah 24, Nur, verse 36, right after the example or allegory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's light being defined in the previous verse of Surah Light, verse 35. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's light is defined only at this place in the Quran. Let's read Allah's light before, as it will connect to the 6th tasbih time frame. Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. Allahu nuru samawati wal ard. The example of His light is like a niche. Within it is a lamp. The lamp is within a glass. The glass is as if it were a planet's atmosphere, lit from a blessed olive tree, neither of the east nor of the west. Its oil would almost glow, even if no fire touched it. Light upon light, nurun ala nur. Allah guides to His light whom He wills, and Allah strikes the examples for mankind, and Allah has knowledge of everything. Thus Surah 24 verse 35 defines the allegory or the example of His light. And then the next verse, Surah 24 verse 36, the 6th tasbih time frame, which says, the lamp or the niche, in houses which Allah permitted that they be raised, and His name to be mentioned therein, glorifying to Him therein in the early morning, bil-ghuduwi, and the afternoon. Thus the 6th tasbih time frame, the early morning glorification, is also reminding us of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's light. And note, without light, we cannot see. And during every phase of the day, we glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as He is the light in the heavens and the earth. The Almighty, the Praiseworthy, brings us out of the darknesses into the light. And now, the last tasbih time frame in the morning is the morning glorification. We just saw the early morning, and now it becomes morning in about an hour or so. Thus, the 7th glorification is the morning glorification, the tasbih. And it is said in 5 different surahs. Surah 3 verse 41, Surah 19 verse 11, Surah 33 verse 42, Surah 40 verse 55, and Surah 48 verse 9. We will not see Surah 3 verse 41 and Surah 19 verse 11 yet, because these two will show us some physical motions of the tasbih. However, we will be seeing those 2 verses thoroughly after we finish seeing the tasbih time frames, inshallah. Therefore, Surah 33 verse 42, Surah 40 verse 55, and Surah 48 verse 9 respectively say, O you who believe, remember Allah, remembering frequently, and glorify Him morning, bukra, and afternoon. So be patient. Indeed, the promise of Allah is truth, and ask forgiveness for your sin, and glorify with the praise of your Lord in the late evening and the morning. In Surah 48 verse 9, that you may believe in Allah and His Messenger, and honor or respect Him, and adore or reverence Him, and glorify Him morning and afternoon. Hence, the 7th glorification is in the morning. There is no mention of a glorification in the forenoon time frame. In case you missed a glorification, you can do it here, and Allah knows best. Then the sun will reach its highest position in altitude in the sky, which is at noon, Zahira. Here you have to praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically, as it says it in Surah 30 verse 18 as follows. And to Him belongs the praise in the heavens and the earth, and at the late evening, and at the time you are at noon, or and when you are at noon. وَحِينَ تُظْهِرُونَ. There are different prayers for praising Allah, and we will see them after the time frames are complete, inshallah. Then, as the sun declines from noon, this is when Salatul Wusta, the middle contact prayer, begins. Note, no glorification is mentioned before Salatul Wusta, the middle contact prayer, except for the morning tasbih, which was before the forenoon time frame that we saw earlier, and the previous ones as well, only to praise Him during the noon, as we will see how afterwards. I will not dwell into the Salatul Wusta, the middle contact prayer, time frame because it was already explained in the Salat time frame video. Now, as the sun is descending from its highest position in the sky and altitude from noon, and this becomes a spiritual noon, the Rawahu, then the 8th tasbih can be noticed, the afternoon glorification. The 8th tasbih time frame is mentioned in 3 places in the Quran, And we saw all of them earlier as well, which the afternoon time frame was mentioned in those surahs. They were Surah 24 verse 36, Surah 33 verse 42, and Surah 48 verse 9, as follows. Surah 24 verse 36, and houses which Allah permitted that they be raised, and His name be mentioned therein, glorifying Him therein in the early morning and the afternoon. Wal asal. Surah 33 verse 41 to 42. O you who believe, remember Allah, remembering frequently, and glorify Him morning and afternoon. And in Surah 48 verse 9, that you may believe in Allah and His Messenger, and honor or respect Him, and adore or reverence Him, and glorify Him morning and afternoon. This afternoon glorification time frame is heading towards the evening. And when you reach the evening time frame, this is where you can do the ninth tasbih, the evening glorification, as it says in Surah 30 verse 17, which we also saw earlier. So glory be to Allah at the time you reach evening, tumsuna, and at the time you reach daybreak. Now, before the sun sets, this will be the time frame where the 10th tasbih is. This is said in Surah 20 verse 130 and Surah 50 verse 39 as follows. And glorify with the praise of your Lord before the rising of the sun and before its setting. وَقَبَلَ غُرُوبِهَا. And in Surah 50 verse 39, instead of saying and before its setting, it says and before the setting. Precision. As the sun sets and enters in between the civil twilight and the nautical twilight, this is where the 11th tasbih time frame begins, the late evening glorification, as it is said in 4 surahs, Surah 3 verse 41, Surah 19 verse 11, Surah 38 verse 18, and Surah 40 verse 55. We had also already seen Surah 38 verse 18, Surah 40 verse 55. As I said earlier as well, Surah 3 verse 41 and Surah 19 verse 11, we will see them thoroughly afterwards. So Surah 38 verse 18 first says, Indeed, we subjected the mountains with him, Prophet David, Dawood, glorifying us in the late evening, bil-ashi, and the sunrise. And Surah 40 verse 55 says, So be patient. Indeed, the promise of Allah is truth. And ask forgiveness for your sin, and glorify with the praise of your Lord in the late evening, bil-ashi, and the morning. Thus the 11th tasbih time frame is in between the civil twilight and the nautical twilight at dusk, late evening. In between the nautical twilight and the astronomical twilight, Salatul Isha, the late evening contact prayer, is to be established, and this was seen in the Salat time frames video. Therefore, we can move on to the next tasbih time frame and the last glorification time frame. Finally, the 12th tasbih time frame, the night glorification. This is said in 4 different surahs. They are Surah 20 verse 130, 41 verse 38, Surah 50 verse 40, and Surah 76 verse 26 respectively. We saw Surah 20 verse 130 twice already, and now a third time, as the night glorification is also mentioned there. And glorify with the praise of your Lord before the rising of the sun and before its setting, and from the hours of the night. وَمِنْ آنَاءِ اللَّيْلِ. Then in Surah 41 verse 38 it says, But if they are arrogant, then those who are near your Lord glorify to Him during the night and the day without fatigue. And Surah 50 verse 40 says, And from the night then glorify Him and the ends of prostration. And Surah 76 verse 26 says, And during the night prostrate to Him and glorify Him a long night, laylan tawila. Now it is important to note that the night time frame is after the astronomical twilight of the late evening, and that the definition of the night is also defined in the Quran in Surah 36 verse 37 as follows. And the sign for them is the night. We withdraw or strip off from it the day. Then behold, they are in darkness. As you can see in Surah 36 verse 37, the night is the complete absence of the day, thus leaving us in darkness. Also in Surah 20 verse 130, it tells us to glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the hours or periods of the night. And in Surah 76 verse 26, to glorify Him a long night. To glorify Him a long night is also said for the day in Surah 73 verse 7, in which the word to glorify, sabhan, is usually mistranslated for occupation or other things instead of glorify, as follows. Indeed, for you during the day is a long glorifying, nahari sabahan tawila. As we saw earlier, there are 12 daytime glorifications, and from the night prostrate to Him and glorify Him a long night, laylan tawila. Thus, back to the night glorification time frame. This is the only time frame that has no light, and the night is divided into 3 portions as detailed in Surah 73 verse 20. But we will get into that in full details with the night tasbih once we arrive at the tahajjud, which is also at night. Only after we see the proofs as to how to glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with His physical motions and utterances using Quranic verses only, insha'Allah. We have thus seen and completed all the time frames for the tasbih, the glorification through the Quran alone. As you can see, the Quran is fully detailed and self-explanatory. Subhanallah, alhamdulillah, la ilaha illallah. And among His signs are the night and the day, and the sun and the moon. Do not prostrate to the sun nor the moon, but prostrate to Allah, the one who created them, if you worship Him specifically. But if you are arrogant, then those who are near your Lord glorify to Him by night and day, and they are not tired. Now let's see the physical motions and the utterances of the tasbih using purely Quranic verses. Subhanallahi Rabbil Alameen. So back to page 1. We saw all the verses highlighted in yellow here, which was on page 2, the tasbih time frames. While we saw the late evening and morning glorification time frame, there were two verses that we did not see, and that